I don't even know. I was just driving and I just seen guns and blue lights. And then I was in the back of a car and I was gone.
New footage just surfaced of 21 Savage getting snatched up by ICE, and the internet is losing it all over again. But what most people still don't know is why they really came after him, what happened during those 9 days locked up, and the one detail his own lawyers say proves this whole thing was a setup. The arrest that shocked the world. Right now, as we speak, footage of one of the most jaw-dropping moments in hip-hop history is making its rounds across every single corner of the internet all over again. We're talking about the moment that completely and utterly shattered everything that millions of fans thought they knew about one of Atlanta's most beloved and most respected rappers. We're talking about the moment that turned the entire music industry upside down and inside out. We're talking about the arrest of 21 Savage by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, and the absolutely earth-shattering revelation that came right along with it. Now, if you were anywhere near social media back in February of 2019, you already know exactly what we're talking about. But for those of you who somehow missed it, or for those of you who are just now discovering this story for the very first time because of the footage that's been circulating and going completely viral, let us take you all the way back to the very beginning and paint the full picture from top to bottom, because this story is so much wilder, so much deeper, and so much more complicated than most people even realize. So let's set the scene. It's February 3rd, 2019. The entire city of Atlanta, Georgia is buzzing with excitement and anticipation because Super Bowl Lou is just hours away from kicking off. The whole world has its eyes on Atlanta, and right there in the middle of all that energy, all that excitement, all that celebration, something absolutely nobody could have predicted was about to go down. 21 Savage, whose real name is Shia bin Abraham Joseph, was arrested by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement in a targeted operation in Metro Atlanta. And when the details of that arrest started to come out, the entire internet damn near broke in half. Because according to ICE, this man who everybody knew as the king of Zone 6, this man who had built his entire career and his entire reputation on being as Atlanta gets, was actually a British citizen, born not in Georgia, not in the American South, not anywhere in the United States of America, but in Newham, London, in the United Kingdom. Now think about that for a second. Let that sink all the way in. 21. Savage was born on October 22nd, 1992, in London, England. He first came to the United States when he was just 7 years old back in 2005, arriving on what is called an H-4 visa, which is a dependent visa that children get when their parents have work visas. But here's where things took a turn that would haunt him for the next decade and a half of his life. That H-4 visa expired in July of 2006. Which meant that from that point forward, from the time he was still just a little kid, he was technically in the country without legal status. And he just kept on living his life. He grew up in Atlanta. He went to school in Atlanta. He survived the streets of Atlanta. He built a music career in Atlanta. And the entire time, almost nobody had any idea that he wasn't actually born there. Now the arrest itself was something straight out of a movie. ICE described it as a targeted operation, and 21 Savage himself confirmed in his very first interview after being released that it absolutely felt that way. He sat down with ABC News and described the whole terrifying ordeal in vivid detail.
It was definitely targeted.
He talked about the moment it all went down, how he was just driving in a vehicle when suddenly everything changed in the blink of an eye.
I don't even know. I was just driving and I just seen guns and blue lights. And then I was in the back of a car and I was gone.
And when they grabbed him, they didn't even bother telling him he was under arrest. They just made it clear they had been looking for him all along.
Tell you you're under arrest?
Nah, they didn't say nothing. They just said, "We got Savage."
They said, "We got Savage."
Now here's something that a lot of people don't know. 21. Savage was pulled over in a vehicle with his cousin, rapper Young Nudy, along with two other men who were actually the targets of an unrelated investigation into gang and assault charges. So while Young Nudy's arrest was about completely different allegations, 21 Savage got swept up in the same operation. And just like that, one of the biggest rappers in the world found himself in the back of a federal vehicle, headed to an ICE detention facility, facing the very real and very terrifying possibility of being deported from the only country he had ever truly known. And to make matters even more intense, ICE officials put out a statement essentially trying to paint 21 Savage as a fraud, claiming that his entire public image as an Atlanta-born rapper was, in their words, false. They pointed to a 2014 felony drug conviction in Fulton County, Georgia, which they initially tried to use as an aggravated felony to strengthen their case for deportation. But here's the thing that ICE conveniently left out of their public statement: that 2014 conviction had already been vacated and sealed under Georgia's first offender law, meaning it had been dealt with and resolved years before the arrest even happened. His legal team came out swinging, saying that ICE had provided incorrect information to the public and that the arrest was an attempt to intimidate him. But there was also another detail that made people really start questioning the timing and the motivation behind this whole operation. See, just days before the arrest, 21 Savage had released the music video for his hit song A Lot, which contained lyrics directly criticizing immigration policies, including the family separations happening at the border. He had also given a politically charged performance on The Tonight Show, where he addressed those same issues. So when ICE swooped in and grabbed him just days later, a whole lot of people, including his own lawyers, started connecting the dots and asking whether this was retaliation for speaking out.
A line in there where you say, went through some things, but I couldn't imagine my kids stuck at the border.
Right.
Do you feel like you were targeted as a result of that? Basically being critical of the immigration system here?
My lawyers think that.
What do you think?
I don't really know. I can't really say. I would see why people would think that, but I really can't say.
9 days in detention and the fight for freedom. So now, 21, Savage is sitting in an ICE detention facility in the state of Georgia, locked inside a room by himself for nearly the entire day, every single day, while the entire world outside those walls is absolutely losing its collective mind. And we're not exaggerating when we say the entire world, because the reaction to this arrest was unlike anything the music industry and social media had ever seen before. He was held in a Georgia detention facility where he remained for about 9 days, and during those 9 days, he was essentially cut off from everything and everyone he knew and loved. His children, his family, his music, his freedom, all of it was gone in an instant. And when he described what that detention center was like, the picture he painted was bleak and isolating in every sense of the word.
I was like in one room all day.
By yourself?
Yeah.
Now, while 21 Savage was locked up and going through what was undoubtedly one of the most difficult and frightening experiences of his entire life, the outside world was erupting in two very different but equally powerful ways. On one side, you had this massive, overwhelming, genuine outpouring of support from some of the biggest and most influential names in the entire music industry. And on the other side, you had an absolute tsunami of memes, jokes, and internet chaos, the likes of which social media had rarely ever seen. Let's talk about the support first, because when we say the music industry rallied behind 21 Savage, we mean they rallied hard. Jay-Z himself stepped in and called the arrest an absolute travesty. And he didn't just stop at words. He immediately hired one of the top legal teams in the entire country to fight for 21 Savage's release and protect his rights. Artists like Cardi B, Meek Mill, Killer Mike, and Offset all spoke out publicly in his defense. Offset specifically took to social media and made a point that cut through all the noise and all the jokes, and a petition calling for 21 Savage to remain in the United States gathered nearly 500,000 signatures. The support was real, it was loud, and it came from every direction. But then there were the memes. Oh, the memes. The revelation of his British origins sparked widespread shock, confusion, and memes across social media, with users joking about his Atlanta accent being fake and tying his persona to every British stereotype you could possibly imagine. Tea and crumpets jokes, fake British accent impressions. People were photoshopping him into pictures with the Queen of England. It was absolute pandemonium on every single social media platform that existed. And the jokes kept coming from every direction. People who were in the industry, people who had heard rumors for years but never fully believed them, were suddenly coming out and confirming that whispers about 21 Savage's true origins had been floating around for a long time. Now, not everybody who cracked jokes came out of it unscathed. Demi Lovato tweeted that the 21 Savage memes were her favorite part of the Super Bowl, and the internet absolutely tore her apart for it. She got so much backlash that she ended up deleting her entire Twitter account. And to make things even more awkward, 21 Savage's own manager revealed that when 21 had heard about Demi's personal struggles with her relapse, he had actually been wishing her well and hoping she got better. So that whole situation left Demi looking pretty bad, even though, if we're being completely honest, she was doing the exact same thing that millions of other people on the internet were doing at that very same moment. Meanwhile, the political side of things was getting heated too. Conservative commentator Tomi Lahren posted a mocking tweet using lyrics from 21 Savage's song Bank Account to celebrate his arrest, and the response from the hip-hop community was swift and fierce. Cardi B quote tweeted her, Nicki Minaj quote tweeted her, and for one brief shining moment, the two queens of rap who had been feuding with each other found common ground in putting Tomi Lahren in her place. But behind all the memes and all the political drama, there was a very real human being sitting in a detention center, separated from his 3 young children who were too small to understand why their father had suddenly disappeared from their lives. And when he finally got out and was reunited with them, the emotion was impossible to miss.
Who the best daddy in the world?
No. What was that moment like yesterday when you got to hug them and see them?
They started jumping me.
On February 12th, 2019, after 9 agonizing days, 21 Savage was granted a $100,000 bond and released the following day. ICE dropped the aggravated felony charge that they had initially tried to use against him, which was a major win for his legal team. But the fight was far from over. He was still in removal proceedings, still facing the very real threat of deportation, and still staring down the possibility of a 10-year ban from re-entering the United States. And he knew that his situation, as terrifying as it was nothing compared to what countless other people in those same detention centers were going through every single day without the resources, without the fame, and without the legal firepower that he was fortunate enough to have.
There are a lot of people who don't get a bond, who you left still back in the detention center. What's your message to them?
I feel your pain, and I'm gonna do everything in my power to try and bring awareness to your pain.
And those words right there, that promise to fight, not just for himself, but for every single person who didn't have the platform or the resources to fight for themselves, that's what made this moment bigger than just one rapper's legal troubles. But the question still remained, would 21 Savage actually be able to stay in the country he called home? Or would the system that had already taken 9 days of his freedom find a way to take everything else too? The long road to redemption. Now you might think that once 21 Savage posted that $100,000 bond and walked out of that detention facility and back into the arms of his children and his family, the whole nightmare was finally over. But that couldn't be further from the truth, because what a lot of people don't realize is that the fallout from that February 2019 arrest didn't just last weeks or months, it lasted years. 4 full years of legal battles, travel restrictions, career limitations, and the constant never-ending cloud of uncertainty hanging over his head every single day. See, when 21 Savage walked out of that detention center, he was free on bond, but he was still in what's called removal proceedings. That means the government was still actively trying to deport him. He was still facing the possibility of being sent back to a country he hadn't lived in since he was a little boy. A country where he had no real connections, no real support system, and no real life waiting for him. His immigration case dragged on for years due to backlogs in the system, with deportation hearings postponed indefinitely, leaving him in a state of limbo that would test the patience and the resilience of even the strongest person alive. And the restrictions that came along with that limbo were very real and very costly. The arrest stalled international tours, preventing him from performing outside the United States for 4 entire years. That meant missing out on shows across Europe, across Canada, across the entire world. At a time when his career was at one of its highest peaks, when he was one of the most in-demand rappers on the planet, he literally could not leave the country. He missed dates on Drake's Canadian tour. He couldn't do festivals overseas. Every international opportunity that came his way had to be turned down because of his unresolved immigration status. But then, in September of 2021, the situation got even more complicated when additional charges surfaced from the original 2019 arrest. Charges of possession of a Schedule II controlled substance, specifically codeine, that was allegedly thrown from his car during the arrest, along with a firearm found in the vehicle, were filed against him. He turned himself in to authorities, but was released on bond that very same day. It was yet another hurdle in what had already become an exhausting and seemingly endless legal marathon. And through all of this, the question that everybody kept coming back to was the same question that 21 Savage himself had raised in his very first interview after being released from detention. He was brought to this country when he was 7 years old. He didn't choose to come here. He didn't choose to overstay his visa. He was a child. And by the time he was old enough to understand what a visa even was, it was already too late.
I know what a visa was. Like, I was 7 when I first came here. I knew I wasn't born here, but I didn't know like what that meant as far as when I transitioned into an adult, how it was gonna affect my life. I wasn't hiding it, but it's like I didn't want to get deported, so I'm not gonna just come out and be like, hey, by the way, I wasn't born here.
His legal team pursued a path called cancellation of removal, arguing that 21 Savage had been in the country for nearly 2 decades, had demonstrated good moral character, and that his U.S. citizen children would face exceptional and extremely unusual hardship if he were deported. It was a long, grueling legal battle that required patience, resources, and an army of lawyers working behind the scenes. And then, finally, after 4 long years of fighting, of waiting, of uncertainty, of not knowing whether the country he called home would allow him to stay, the news came. In 2023, 21 Savage was granted lawful permanent resident status and received his green card, officially terminating deportation proceedings and resolving the immigration threat that had loomed over his life since that Super Bowl Sunday in 2019. He could finally travel. He could finally tour internationally. He could finally breathe, and breathe he did. With his green card in hand and his legal battles behind him, 21 Savage announced plans for his first ever UK concert, a homecoming show in the country where he was born but had barely any memory of. It was poetic, it was powerful, and it represented the closing of one of the most dramatic and emotional chapters in modern hip-hop history. But this story was never just about 21 Savage. It was always about something much bigger than one rapper. It was about the estimated 575,000 black undocumented immigrants living in the United States who face dual biases, dealing with racial profiling on one side and immigration enforcement on the other. It was about the nearly 2 million undocumented individuals who arrived in this country as children, just like 21 Savage did, through no fault or choice of their own. It was about a system where only 14% of detained immigrants have legal representation, meaning the overwhelming majority of people who end up in 21 Savage's situation don't have a Jay-Z to call, don't have a powerhouse legal team to fight for them, and don't have millions of fans signing petitions on their behalf. 21 Savage's lawyer, Alex Spiro, made that very point crystal clear when he spoke to the media after the release.
Well, I think the message is that we can't forget about the people that don't have the resources, that don't have the fame to fight for their freedom, both in the criminal system and in the immigration system. You know, there's people that are just totally forgotten that exist in these detention centers, and people like Jay-Z, and he stepped in for Meek Mill, and he stepped in here, and now I'm hoping people like 21 Savage will bring light to these issues and help the people that are forgotten.
And that is exactly what 21 Savage has done. Since resolving his immigration status, he has continued to use his platform to speak out about immigration reform, about the conditions inside detention centers, and about the need for the system to be more humane and more fair for everyone, not just the people who happen to be rich and famous. He has called this entire journey his redemption arc, and honestly, looking at everything he went through and everything he came out the other side as, it's really hard to disagree with that. So the next time you see that footage of 21 Savage getting arrested by ICE going viral on your timeline, remember that what you're watching isn't just a wild moment in hip-hop history. It's a reminder of a broken system, a testament to resilience, and the story of a man who fought like hell to keep the only home he ever truly knew. Love this video? Click on the cards on your screen for more.